Today we're looking at the first video in a series I'll be calling Random Rogues. These videos will feature 2 or 3 DC rogues that aren't usually classified as the more well-known villains. You may disagree because, like me, you're so deep in the DCAU that only a Dr. Milo or Shriek's assistant might fall into that category though. No, this video will be covering the TNBA designs of the Mad Hatter, the Ventriloquist and Scarface, and Selina Kyle. Perplexingly, this animated line is now almost come and gone twice, and TNBA didn't get quite enough attention either time. I still don't understand why McFarlane didn't make any new figures for the new Batman adventures, but I'm here to fill in the gaps. Let's start with Selina Kyle. Catwoman is definitely one of Batman's popular villains, but a figure of Selina was always less likely, and certainly one of the TNBA variety. I like telling stories and recapping episodes on my shelf, so she was a natural fit to go with Nightwing for a pairing from the episode You Scratch My Back. Her recipe came about from having leftover parts from a couple of different figures, and then noticing that Livewire's head would make a great base for Miss Kyle. This simple body recipe will be a Lois Lane torso on TNBA Catwoman legs. Alright, let's get started on her modifications. I'll start by dremeling the collar and some details off of Lois's jacket. Cut off all of Livewire's hair, and then cut the TNBA Catwoman in half so we can use her legs. The Catwoman torso and Lois legs can go together quite nicely to make another TNBA female civilian. Any ideas who that might be? Her epoxy changes are simply a little to cover her jacket seam on her fake skirt, and then some built up above the belt line to fake that being a separate top. Once that dries, add 4 large buttons for a nice 90s fashionable look. Selina needs a matching 90s haircut, so add epoxy on top of her head and shape it like so. That's all for sculpting, so let's see what paint she'll need. She's a pretty simple custom all around and will only need 4 colors. Let's start with this gray for her jacket, add some black buttons and a belt, carry the black up to her hair, paint Livewire's white skin with peach, and then accent her face with light blue eyes. Alright, that about wraps her up. A bonus mini touch-up you can do for her alternate identity is repaint Catwoman's mouth area with a stronger white and give her lips that red dot of her lipstick. Not huge changes, but just that much more accurate for this design. From friend of the felines to the master of puppets, let's tackle Arnold, Wesker, and Mr. Scarface. These 2 recipes shouldn't come as any surprise to you, but I use a BTAS Ventriloquist and Scarface to make them. No, you know what? I actually swapped his legs out for BTAS Mad Hatter's legs because of the similar pear-shaped appearance they shared. I also swapped out his feet for a pair of shoes from Clarion. His head was the biggest question mark because I didn't know if the BTAS design could be transformed into the Dilbert-esque eraser head from this show. Spoiler alert, it sure can. Let's see how. Arnold's head shape is considerably different in his redesign compared to his original look. Not wanting to mess with the original head too much, I'll remove his glasses and hair, and then make a cast of his head. Using this new base, I'll dremel those cheeks down and fill in the back of his head where his hair was. Add some more epoxy to the top of his head to get that Dilbert feel I mentioned earlier. Dremel down his mouth area and sculpt a new lower lip to go up over his top lip. Similar revisions are needed on his nose too. Dremel down the overall width and thickness and then add an epoxy triangular nose instead. Okay, he's looking fairly blank, but those glasses and tiny hair pieces will do a lot for his look later. For his body, heat up and remove the original figure's bow tie and then dremel off his buttons on his sport coat. Lastly, dremel Clarion's shoe buckles off so he looks less pilgrimy. Add an epoxy collar, smooth out where his buttons were, and then thicken up his legs at his thighs and shins. For Mr. Scarface, we'll need to dremel his feet down to tiny points as the new design's feet are so much smaller than the originals. Dremel down his cheeks and chin and remove his cigar. His hat will need to increase from a 2-gallon hat to a 10-gallon hat. Along with the giant hat, he needs to grow a large unibrow. Then fill in a tiny amount of epoxy in the gap of his teeth where his cigar was. Sand and or lightly dremel anything on either of these mooks if you need it before you prime and paint them. Mr. Wesker's new colors aren't much different at all than his BTAS design. I'll start with his white shirt, followed by his gray coat and pants. The peach will go on both his skin and his glasses. Black for his shoes and facial details, and then one little trick for his hair. After all of his painting is done, you'll want to glue his hair on. Even though it's super glue, I've still had to re-glue them a couple of times because it's very fragile. I made them out of black plastic clothing price tags cut to size. Scarface will change from a dark blue suit to a white suit, and his shirt and tie combo will invert. You'll notice I'm not using a straight white for him. That's because he seemed to have a very cool white on the show. I did paint his tie pure white because it was always brighter in shadow for some reason though. The same peach skin for his head, and then his black eyebrow and scar. Oh, and I made a dynamite accessory out of chopped Q-tips in epoxy editions. I wanted to mix it up so both show versions didn't have the mini Tommy gun, and the dynamite came straight from his episode in the safe. They look really great together. Finally, let's finish off with a fairy tale deep dive of the Mad Hatter. The lonely wretch named Jervis Tetch went through quite a design change when BTAS switched to TNBA, and I'm one of those that prefers this look, so he was a must-have for me to make. Given his much smaller stature, it only made sense to start with a Clarion body, but then keep BTAS Hatter's head, neck, collar, bow tie, and feet. His hands were donated nicely from a TNBA Joker because the rolled gloves would be perfect and the wrist pegs could double as Tetch's actual skinny wrists. Also from that Joker, the actual ties from his bow tie. Let's look at his modifications. Heat up Clarion and remove his head, neck, legs, and feet. You may have already removed his feet if you made the previous recipe, but he'll need those swapped with BTAS Hatter's feet. The same will be true for his neck and head. I figured it best to use the original neck and neck peg for the best fit. Next, you can start dremeling Clarion's legs way thinner because this Jarvis has extremely skinny chicken legs. Keep going down onto his feet and really thin those out too. Switch to your disc Dremel and cut the middles out on the bottoms of his feet to fake that heeled shoe look he has. Back up to his torso, you'll want to Dremel his shoulders down some so they slope down much more. Tetch doesn't have much of a frame, and the cape piece we'll add on top will cover any mishaps and also add some thickness, so you can feel free to reduce those shoulders down to almost nothing. Dremel his teeth down some on the sides for his rat face look, a touch off his nose, and then a little off that long hair in the back. That should cover all of his dremeling, so now we can move on to his sculpting. I'll start with sculpting his large cuffs onto his sleeves, followed by the buttons after those dry. Give him some new pointy elf ears and some shaggy sideburns, and then we can make his rubber additions. I like to use a thin rubber or foam sheet for making new clothing pieces on my animated figures. It gives a nice smooth appearance and can wrap and form very easily as needed. I also like to test out my shapes and run trials with paper prototypes instead of using up more expensive rubber or foam. The first shape is a fairly simple tube that will wrap around his main body for his long overcoat. Luckily, since he's so thin, there's no deviation to it and you only need a rectangle similar to this one. His top capelet piece is a little more tricky. I made this guy back when I was just starting out on my DCAU customs and literally did trial and error until I got it right. These days I've realized you can simply mimic actual sewing patterns, and that starts you off in a much better place. I've actually made this guy twice now, and I think my second attempt looks a little better than my first, so when you try yours, make it look more like this one and not that one. Or better. This guy's a little unique with these additions because you'll paint his main body, but then glue on all of the extra bits before painting the rest of him. After sanding and priming, start by repainting his legs black, and then his shoes black and white with 2 black dots each. Paint his arms a dark foresty green, and then his cuffs tan with black buttons. His collar will be the same tan as his cuffs, and his gloves are white. Paint the wrist pegs a pale peach to look like his wrists, and then bring that color up onto his neck and face. His hair is a very light tan, and that will go on the card on his hat as well. Speaking of the hat, that same dark green from before is the base, and then it has an olive green band. Back then I was mixing paints more often, so I don't have an exact color, but it's very much like a split pea soup green. Pretty gross. Now we glue on his long overcoat and then sculpt and paint the 3 black buttons down the front. Wrap and glue his capelet and then glue the 2-part bow tie on. Paint those new additions with the 2 shades of green on the coat and the tie, and then finish him up with any more face details. There he is! Like I said, I made him a few years ago, but he still remains one of my favorites. I can't quite explain why, but he really jumps off the shelf straight from the screen. And there's the unusual trio of random rogues all together. Who do you think still needs to be made from TNBA? That's all for today's video. Thanks for watching. Join me next month as we commemorate Superman the Animated Series turning 30 years old next month. Celebrating the pilot means it's time to make Superman's birth parents. Come back to follow along and watch me make Jor-El and Lara with a bonus baby Kal-El. Thanks again for checking this video out today, and go explore my catalog of shorts and videos after this. My Instagram link is in the description if you want to see even more customs and some neat photos of them. Feel free to like and subscribe to get notified for everything, and then hit the hype button down below if you'd like to help me grow. Have a good one, and happy customizing.